Greetings, this is Paul, sitting in the car, talking about miracles. Well, of course, the miracles. I'm going to talk about holy relationships and God's holy family. I asked Holy Spirit if I should, I was going to start reading some of the course to find some quotes about holy relationships and kind of brush up on the topic and to be able to get a good grip on it, but Holy Spirit said just go, so we're just going to fly from the seat of our pants here. I haven't really tried to find out what the course says about holy relationships, and some people have gone into this more than I have, and so I hopefully don't say something incorrect, but I'm going to base this on some very basic starting points. The way that God has arranged relationships in heaven, what holiness is, and how that contrasts to the way that we try to relate to people in this world with special relationships. So please help me with this, Holy Spirit. Help me to know what to say, what to do. So here's a model for the perfect family, the perfect way of relating to others, and the actual real structure of God's family. God is the Father, God is the Creator. God creates many sons, many children. All of those children, therefore, are siblings. They are your brothers. God is the only cause of each brother. Therefore, each brother does not in any way cause each other, is not the creator of each other, is not the father of each other, is not the child of each other. Every single child of God is equal on the same footing. They're all God's children, regardless of how they show up in this world. Perfect relationship should mean, or holy relationship should mean, relating in the way that God intended in His creation in heaven. And that means I am as God created me. It means acknowledging your brother is exactly perfectly equal to you. Recognizing that you are exactly identical to your brothers because God creates in His likeness. So every child that God creates is a perfect reflection of God's nature. Therefore, they're all identical because they all come from one source and with one blueprint, if you will. There are no different looking individuals that God creates that are like, this one's different and this one's different and this one looks different and this one's a different shape and this one's a different size and this one's a different color. None of that applies in God's creation because God can only create in His own likeness. So everything He creates has to be like Him, making everything identical. And okay. So the relationship that you have with God, when it's in its perfect natural state, is a holy relationship with God. The way that you relate to your brothers, your siblings, your equal sons of God, if you relate to them in a perfect way with holiness and recognition of who their causer is, the fact that they do not cause you and you don't cause them, that will lead to an acknowledgement of your equality, and that everything that applies to them applies to you equally. And in that way of relating, you will relate in a holy way, because you will recognize wholeness and truth and sanity and peace and love, being the way that God intended. So God has set up a family, a holy family, and there's even some references in the Course to God's family, that He's the Father or the Creator, or the Source, the Causer. He causes many brothers. They're all equals in every way possible. Everyone is treated the same. Everyone is loved the same. God loves all of His brothers equally, all of His children equally. And the Course says you cannot enter into relationship with any of God's children unless you're willing to love them all and equally. So what that means is, if I try to relate only to one particular brother with love, and I try to relate to another brother with not love or lack of love, I'm not really capable of that. And it's if I have a special, isolated, exclusive way of relating to one person, it's going to automatically make it impossible for me to relate to any of them in a loving, holy way. Because if I'm focusing on exclusivity and specialness and selfishness and isolation and imprisonment and limitation and denial, trying to give this one person a special, adapted kind of relation that I don't give to everyone else, there is separation in that idea. That way of relating, it's lacking wholeness, therefore it lacks holiness, and therefore I'm not relating to that special person in a special way, in a holy way. So now I'm not relating to anyone in a holy way. If I want to have a holy relationship with a specific person, and true holiness, not just almost holy or sort of holy, but fully unconditionally loving and completely perfect in its holiness, it cannot just apply to that one person. It must apply to the entire sonship. Every single child of God must be loved equally. Otherwise, you cannot have a holy relationship with any of them. As soon as you go away from wholeness and you're saying something applies to this group of people, and I'm going to have a holy relationship with my spouse, or I'm going to have a holy relationship with the person at the store, but I'm not going to have a holy relationship with others, and those people over there are not holy enough for me. You can't maintain both of those states at once. You're in contradiction, so you're automatically in conflict. So you cannot give unconditional love to only one person. You cannot give holiness to just one child of God. You cannot have a holy relationship with only one of God's creations, because you have to be holy, you have to be in wholeness, and you have to be acknowledging wholeness. That means you have to acknowledge the whole of creation. You have to acknowledge equality of all of God's children. Otherwise, you're not being holy. If you're thinking this person is a bit more special than this one, and this person is a bit more holy than this one, you are attacking and not being holy. So to relate to any of God's children in a perfect, full, holy, whole way, doesn't matter who they are. If you're gonna say this is true of them, it must be true of every other being that God created. So the golden rule, which is God's law, which stems from the fact that God creates in his likeness. Therefore, everything that God creates is identical. Everything that God creates is exactly, perfectly a clone copy, down to the finest detail, perfectly identical to the others. Therefore, what applies to one applies to all. What applies to God applies to every son. That's the golden rule. That means that we have shared interests, and it means that whatever's true of me has to be true of every other son in the entire creation. So in order for it to be true of a brother that I see them as holy, the golden rule is going to come into effect and say, I can only relate to them in a holy way and recognize their holiness if that also applies to myself. So I have to also recognize and acknowledge my own holiness. And if I recognize my holiness, I will not be able to keep seeing specific groups of people in a not holy way and singling out certain people as holy. I'm going to have to see a reflection of myself in everyone, and therefore I must see that everyone, every son of God is holy simultaneously. Otherwise I'm being exclusive. And if I be exclusive and I say I'm just gonna have a holy relationship with this one partner or one special person, I am shutting out others, therefore I'm not including the whole, so I'm not being holy. I may be getting towards holiness. Sometimes you might have areas of your mind that are more holy than others. Let's say some parts of you that are more healed or have less issues. And some of those things might project onto certain people more than others in an illusory way. And so you might think, okay, I'm more holy with this person, but I'm more special with this person. It's a step towards becoming equal in all relationships and having every relationship be holy. But to really get to where you can say it's holy, holiness is not some kind of almost holiness. It is divinity. It is perfection of being exactly as God created you, being your immortal spirit self, a soul with absolutely no ego whatsoever. If you can get to that point where you are now being holy, you are now everywhere, and you're now in everyone, and therefore now you recognize the holiness that's in you is the same as the holiness that's in them. Therefore I am relating with and relating to holiness all the time for every person, unconditionally, with no exceptions. You cannot enter into relationship, real relationships. So holy relationships are real. And we're not talking about bodies necessarily here. We're talking about relating mind to mind, or spirit to spirit, or soul to soul, in reality, not in the dream. Having a holy relation is a real way of relating. So in God's creation in heaven, everything is perfect, everything's holy, everything is shared. There's perfect sharing, and because there are many beings, every being has to be willing to be open and to share everything that exists with everyone else. Nobody can take possession and ownership and exclusion of something and say, this is mine and it's not yours, that's instantly the ego. So in God's creation, there is permanently holy relationship. The sons of God are always at the level of soul, having perfect holy relationship. Spirit is in a state of grace forever. So this is God's family. The family structure is God is the Father. He creates these children on one level, and all of the children together are the one Son. And being a one Son doesn't mean there's only one child. It means that there are countless children who share. The sharing aspect, like each child is a whole within themselves, and they're perfect within themselves, and they're fully created within themselves. They're independent, but they also are so willing to share with all the other children that they're perfectly expanded and whole, that they are like overlapping the other children and in other children, sharing themselves with others, being like joined and bonded, but they still have independence. They still are individual beings. God, who encompasses all being, nevertheless creates separate beings who have everything individually and want to share it to increase their joy. I know people don't like the word separation when we're talking about reality in heaven, but there are separate beings in heaven. It's just a way of describing it. It's holographic. There are many parts. So the family unit in reality, in its most healthy, natural state, is God the Father and all these children, and then the children also have creations of their own within their own being. So a child of God who encompasses all being, or encompasses the being of themselves, nevertheless creates additional children of their own kingdom, which are also separate beings, and who have everything individually and want to share it to increase their joy. And who knows if that carries on. The Course says there's one continuous line of creation, and all of these beings are communicating because they're all in the same order of reality, the same order of creation. Now, I don't know for a fact whether children of children in heaven incarnate into bodies. I don't know. Jesus says yes, some of them do. But generally speaking, even the children of the children, even though they're hierarchically within the larger beings, you could say, they're still equal and in the perfect likeness of their parent. So they're still in the image of God, and what is true of them is still true of God. They're still perfect creators. They're still co-creators. They still have free will. They still are loving, perfect beings who have not diminished or lack anything. They're just as capable of creating as God is. They're just as capable as their parent. So, no matter where they're coming from, once they get into bodies, we now have a situation. Feeling a bit drainagey today. So now, holy relationships, the template for the perfect family is this relationship structure. God is the cause, the main cause of all the sons. The sons are the cause of their children. There is no horizontal causality between any of the sons of God. None of them are causing each other. None of them are at the effect of each other. None of them are parents or children to each other. And so, if you were to relate to other people in that way, acknowledging that perfectly, you would acknowledge that your brothers don't cause you, and you're not being affected by other people, and you recognize all of your brothers as identical, and you treat them all the same, and you have unconditional love all the time in the same way, to the same degree for every individual, because that's the only way that you can have holy relationship with any of them, is by recognizing their equality and their likeness as God intended. And this, unfortunately, somewhat flies in the face of the traditional relationship structures and family structures that we have set up in this world. Parents and children, grandparents, grandchildren, ancestors, brothers and sisters are probably the closest match to the structure of how you should relate to others, provided you don't do it in a special way. Uncles and aunts and neighbors and national identities and cultural identities and groups and belonging to a certain party, or being of a different race or different gender, or anything body related in terms of how I'm different to others. All these things designed by the ego come in the way of and corrupt God's perfect family structure, or they fight with it. So in the world, you have a parent who is not your parent. Your birth or biological parents are not your real parents. They are just your brothers, but they're fulfilling a role temporarily, an illusory role of being this person who somehow came before you, or is above you, or has power over you, or created you, or caused you, or gave birth to you. All these ideas that an equal brother suddenly became your father, or they took the place of God. And similarly with children, all of a sudden you have these children who actually are your brothers. They're actually your equals. They have just as many rights as you do. They are just as holy, just as much authority, just as much recognition of their place in the kingdom. And so when you own children and you control them and you think that you're the only one who's responsible for them and they're yours, and you have some kind of special rights over them, this is all made up ego stuff. This is not God's intended structure for relationships. And it's partly down to the hierarchy of illusions that the ego has created this world in which there's a hierarchy all over the place, different levels and degrees of things. So now you have this big tree, a family tree, with all these levels and all these like different layers of relationship and different interactions between layers, and all kinds of specialness going on, all kinds of denial of equality. When it's, let's just say that that's entirely dysfunctional and unhealthy, because if you're not relating to your equal brother in an equal way, in an unconditionally loving way, regardless of how they're showing up or what body they're in or who gave birth to them, then you are not relating in a holy way to yourself or to them. Doesn't matter if they're a child, doesn't matter if they're a parent or a grandparent or a neighbor or whoever they are. If you have special rules and special ways of relating and exclusive ways of relating that only apply to certain individuals based on certain roles that are fictional, and you don't apply it the same to others, that is special, and it means there is ego there, and it's dysfunctional, and it's you're in a special relationship. So whenever you have specialness, you always have two things. You have the specialness itself, which makes something seem special, artificially valuable, important, cherished, attached to, put on a pedestal, worshipped, at the same time as lacking, sacrificing, putting them before you or putting yourself before them, and all these kind of dynamics and these special based forms of relating to people, individuals, that are fundamentally dysfunctional because it's based on specialness. So whenever you're in specialness, you're not in wholeness, because you're saying, I want this group of people to have this special way of being related to, and I want these other group of people to have a different way of being related to. So there's a different set of rules here for different people. Therefore, this is not wholeness. This is not holiness. I am not relating to any of them in a holy way. I can't. So when you're thinking, okay, I'm having the most special, amazing relationship with my child, or this one parent, or with this particular relative, or a friend, or some lover, or your husband or wife, or some person that you met at work, whatever it is. If you think that is the best relationship ever and all the other relationships suck, it's still special. That one relationship cannot be holy because it's excluding and treating that person in a different way than others. So even if in that specialness it seems very, very pure, it has to be lacking something because it's excluding others. You can't have two ways of relating to people if you're going to relate to any of them in a holy way. So if you've got different ways of relating to people, even if some of those people are your best people, your closest people, your most trusted people, even if you think they're the ones who are the most special to you and that you're having the most heartfelt, open, trusting love with, the love of your life, the person that you think you love the most in all the world, the truth is, and you have to be honest, the truth is that you do not love them 100%. You cannot be loving them 100% because you don't have unconditional love. You don't have unconditional love for a special individual. And a lot of people don't recognize this. They think, I unconditionally love my child. I unconditionally love my parents. I unconditionally love that person. But I relate to these other people with less love I relate to those other people with a different way of relating. I reserve certain special things for this group of friends. I don't see everyone as equal. Therefore, there is something missing from that unconditional love relationship that's present elsewhere. So if I section off a bunch of stuff, if I section off a bunch of stuff and say this applies to you guys, and this other stuff applies to you guys, even if these guys are my best guys and I love them so much, and there's no better person in the world, blah, 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 the fact is there's some stuff over here that's not over here. There's some rules and some values and some forms of relationship over here that aren't applying over here. So this doesn't have everything, and this doesn't have everything. So either, here's your two options of your way of relating to people. Number one, compromise and relate to everyone differently, and don't relate to anyone in a full way. No one gets the fullness of your love. Or, number two, treat everyone the same. That's your only options. When you're excluding anyone, you're not being holy. The ego is exclusion. It is isolation and imprisonment. And so when you think, I'm having a wonderful relationship with this person that I'm not having with this other person, and something's wrong with this other person or whatever, something's wrong with you. Something is coming between the two of them in your mind. You have a split mind. So you're not whole within yourself because you're seeing two different realities, two different sets of truth, two different kinds of rules. Inequality, putting someone on a pedestal and saying this person is perfect, that is denial. That's fucking bullshit. If they're on a pedestal, other people are not on a pedestal. So you believe in inequality, which means you believe in emphasizing the way that people are not like each other. Therefore, you emphasize separation. Therefore, you are an attacker. Therefore, you are attacking the person on the pedestal just as much as the people that are off it. And no matter how much idol worship you have, no matter how much you think your kids are fucking perfect when they're not, no matter how much you think that your own creations, your offspring, can do no wrong, and whenever anybody criticizes it or says something about it, you throw a fucking fit, which you see quite often. Something's wrong there. And I can hear people thinking, they're probably going to be thinking, now you're not a parent and you don't have any kids and you wouldn't know what it's like. Well, I do. So, although we've started off in this world with these kind of relationships and these dynamics where you've got people who are older than others and someone has more experience and a parent has more maturity and they're supposed to guide and help raise the kids and protect them and all this stuff, it is fundamentally dysfunctional. It is fundamentally flawed, fundamentally lacking, and fundamentally unhealthy. We have to find a way to learn how to treat everyone in the same way. We have to find a way to not be special towards anyone. We have to find out how can we create a reflection of the family of God in this world, how can we produce holy relationships and holy ways of relating to people while we're here that is a perfect match to the way that God's willed and intended it, which means you have to therefore transcend all of the special kinds of relating that goes on in this world. It means you have to dissolve the family unit at some point. You have to transcend the special dynamics that are going on between you and other people. And this is especially difficult between parents and children. When a child comes into the world and they incarnate into a body, they're putting themselves in a position of vulnerability. It's the ego's version of innocence, which can be attacked, because real innocence cannot be attacked. So now you've got this combination of fake innocence and vulnerability and attackability and total external dependence on the world, meaning that, symbolically as well, something in the world caused and created this child. So a parent gave birth to this child. The dream gave birth to you. That means a cause outside of you seems like it created you. And this is how the ego has set it up in this world, to be the total opposite and the total denial of who you are and where the cause is. To make it look like you didn't choose any of this. There's just as much unwillingness to be responsible for choice and responsible for causality in birth as there is in death. Both states of birth and death are absent of responsibility for being the one who has the power of decision and the one who has chosen to put yourself in situations. And so people come into the world, into families and bodies, and instantly, with denial, causing amnesia, so you don't even remember that you had past lives and other things, you come in through a layer of denial that is in between this world and the next dimension, and it blocks out awareness and makes it seem as though you're starting from scratch, so that you've disowned all of your unconscious guilt. And it was the denial of your unconscious guilt that made you incarnate. And so now you're in a body, and now it seems as though what you are, or your identity, or yourself, your form, is the effect of the world. Something in the world caused you, created you. Your parents caused you and created you. Therefore, you are at the effect of them. And young children especially are very vulnerable in this way to believing this artificial dynamic that is insane of the things outside of you are where the truth is. Whatever your parents say about you or how they treat you must be the truth. And you adapt to the external truth and are very influenceable and susceptible in that young state where you don't seem to have the ability to discern and be strong in your truth that I am not the effect of this world and nothing in this world is the cause of me, including my parents, including my family, including the world, including the dream. It is not the cause of me. God is my Father. And so we get lost at the very early stages in this dynamic. And so it sets up this view where you think love is outside of you, and love caused you, and whatever it says about you must be true, and then you believe that that's true of you, and you form all these bullshit beliefs about yourself. If your parents and your family and other people don't treat you with perfect, unconditional, divine love, it leads to you believing that you must not be lovable, that you are the reason why they don't love you. Something's wrong with you, and you need their approval. You need to somehow get the fucking love from somewhere outside yourself and get it into you in order for you to be okay. And that's totally ego. It's an absolute lie that you need to get love from other people. You do not need to get love from anyone else, because if you're in a state of I need love, it's a state of believing that you lack love. So you don't believe that love is in you, and you think somehow you've lost it already, even though God created it in you and you are it. That sense of lack and deprivation will project the source of love outside yourself, and that's what put you in a body in the first place. And now that you're in a body, the ego set the dynamic so that the special relationships around you reinforce and seem to prove to you that you're not good enough unless other people approve. You're not loved or lovable unless other people love you. And if there's any reason why other people don't treat you with love, it must be because of something with yourself, that somehow you've caused them to hurt you, or you caused them to hate you, or you caused them not to love you, because they must be truth. Truth is outside you, so they must be truth. So if the truth says you are a piece of shit and you're not worth anything, you start believing that must be true about me, and it forms these horrendous beliefs that you decided on to believe and agree to, and people go through the whole rest of their lives with these dysfunctional self-beliefs that totally fuck up relationships. So when you start with this belief that I am totally dependent on my parents because they are the cause of me, so what I am is what they say I am caused by them, I am the effect of them, that instantly puts you into a special relationship because they are your fucking brother. They are not your parents. They are not the cause of you. Your parents are not the cause of you. God is the cause of you. As soon as you get into this thing that you believe that your earth parents are the thing that caused you, where you came from, they're the source of love, they are your father or your mother, and you are the child of them, and they created you. And if you relate to them in that way, under those premises, it is absolutely dysfunctional from the start. And it leads to, and it does lead to, all kinds of dysfunctional ways of relating to those people. In almost every case, you could probably say this about everyone, that not even getting into the ways that the parents control the children believe that they depend on the parent in order to survive and exist and be who they are and to have what they have. And so if they're lacking in any way, it's the parent's fault. If the parent doesn't love them, there's going to be a freaking war. If the parent tries to force the child to do something they don't really want to do, and it turns into a tyrannical rulership or a dictatorship where the parent is just being controlling and domineering and overprotective, it is going to condemn and isolate the child, and the child is going to grow up with this ridiculous dynamic of feeling this need, this lack in this need. I've got to get my parents' approval. I want to get them to love me. I want them to be proud of me. Stop fucking making your parents proud of you. God is already finding you worthy. You don't need to do anything to make somebody proud of you. This is a ridiculous human manufactured thing. I just want my dad to be proud of me. I just want my mum to be proud of me. I'm going to make them proud. Why? Why do you do it? You do it because you think that if you can make them proud, they will love you. If you make them proud, you can trigger off and cause them indirectly to tell you how fantastic you are. You don't need to get their approval because they are not your creator. They are just your equal brother, and if you get into that dynamic where you're saying, there's something about you that has authority over me, and there's something about you that I have to please, and there's something about you that I need to be a certain way in order for me to be okay, and I need to have you be pleased with me or proud of me or tell me how good I am in order for me to be secure in myself. It's bullshit. And you're giving your power away to someone who is not supposed to have power over you. You're not supposed to be under the authority of your parents. And regardless of how it seems natural in this world, or natural for bodies, or how it happens in nature, or animals giving birth to animals, or whatever justification shit you want to come up with, it's bullshit ego crap. It's covering up the truth. This is unnatural. It is unhealthy. And you cannot have that kind of relationship with a parent and a child without it being dysfunctional and without it being special. It is not a holy relationship. It is denying holiness. And so you get people who get into their teens and into their 20s and into their 30s who have not grown up because they cannot get out from under the thumb of the fucking parent. They cannot see themselves as an equal. It seems impossible for the parents to let go of having to be the parent, which in truth, even though it seems that they don't want to let go of being a parent, if they were to do so, they would be so much fucking happier, because then you get to a point where you're equal with your children and you can have a healthy, holy relationship with them where you actually communicate in a loving way, without all of the stupid power struggles and all the stupid disapproval and saying that your child isn't good enough and trying to please the parent and trying to get their affection. And you got to remember also that parents were at one point a child and were probably children to parents who themselves were lacking because of also the relationship, the special relations with their parents. And so most parents are dysfunctional within themselves. It's very difficult to find a parent who is exhibiting a holy relationship with their children. It's probably almost non-existent in the world, where the parent is so holy and so sane and so respecting of God's will and acknowledging God's family structure that they're relating to the child in a perfectly holy way. It is unheard of. And so your parents are fundamentally having their own issues. And so then, because they have their own issues and they're not perfect, and the child is dependent on them thinking that they're perfect, there's then this struggle between expecting perfection of them when they can't be perfect and putting them on a pedestal when they can't be on a pedestal, and thinking that they're supposed to be a certain way when they can't be, and trying to get them to change into a way that you think they should be, so that you'll be happier, even though how they are is none of your goddamn business, so that you can indirectly influence them and get them to love you the way that you think you should be loved. If there's ever this component in the relationship of manipulation where you feel the need to not accept them as they are, and you cannot let them be as they are, and you're attached to them, and you depend on them, and you need them, and you need them to be a certain way and treat you in a certain way, and you'd be horrified if they stopped being your parent. There's a problem there. That is a special relationship. It is dysfunctional because now you're getting into causes outside myself, and I'm at the effect of the world that I see, and who I am is being affected by these people, and they're responsible for me, and why aren't they being a good enough parent, and why don't they love me enough? And people go through their whole lives with holes in their heart, emptiness, lack of love, lack of self-esteem, lack of worth, holding out for and waiting for their parents to love them. And because their parents cannot love them unconditionally, because they don't love themselves unconditionally, they cannot accomplish what you're wanting them to accomplish. And even if they could, even if your parent was Jesus, even if you had a perfect, divine, holy parent like God, you still are not supposed to get all of your needs met by that person. You're not supposed to be dependent on having them supply you with yourself, cause you, make you happy, fix your life, be responsible for your existence. And you get parents that just can't let go, and the child that takes advantage of that, and then the child gets into these dysfunctional ways of relating and irresponsibilities, and being an irresponsible child by not owning up to holiness, not taking responsibility for the power of decision, not wanting to be an equal, wanting to stay a child, be a spoiled little brat, because you don't want to be as God created you. That you don't want to be this independent, self-contained, one with yourself, one within yourself, holy, healed, sane, powerful, decision-making being who does not have any needs and doesn't need parents and families and other people to give or supply those needs, because you don't have any lack, because you are being the fullness of yourself. The opposite of being full of self is being selfish, and so children and parents typically are selfish in various ways, various degrees. And there is so much dysfunctionality in most family relationships that there's all this power struggle and this ownership and this trying to force each other, and non-acceptance and no freedom and no equality, and not being able to really communicate, not being able to connect at a level that's equal, not feeling heard, not being acknowledged, not being recognized, feeling abandoned or being rejected or unloved, not being able to unite with your brother, and then getting to a point in the teenage years where people blow up and suddenly start getting all pissy and shitty, where the ego is trying to, or the person is trying to find their own identity, so they're trying to push away all of the sources of control and coercion and forcefulness and being under the thumb of the parents. You're trying to get out from underneath this heavy weight of inequality and tyrannical rule to try to get to become an equal, but the parent won't let you get there, and they want to keep you in as a child and keep you imprisoned as a child and not let you grow up on your own and not let you make your own mistakes and not give you the freedom that God has given you, that's your right. And then you get this tension between the teenagers and the parents, where they're trying to establish an identity and figure out who they are and get away from some of that sense of dependence, at the same time as still needing some of that dependence because they still believe in it, so they blame the parents for everything. And then you go through that phase because you're having to now go up against the parent and try to compete with them for power and for equality, to like say, hey, acknowledge me and let me be myself and let me have my space and let me be equal and let's acknowledge my soul that has been repressed and suppressed and attacked and controlled since birth, and where the parents just tell the kids what they have to do without giving them any freedom, or they just beat the shit out of them if they don't comply, or which is abuse and which should be arrested. You should never be violently attacking a child for any reason. It's the most pathetic form of parenting. And if that child was an adult, there would be a lawsuit. And that kind of treatment leads to even more dysfunction and more hatred and more lack of love and worse relationships. It is not educational. It is just punishment. It is attack. Punishment does not teach you to be a loving person. Punishment does not cause you to be a better human being. It makes you worse. It is dysfunctional. It is a very bad way of trying to get a child to behave a certain way. And why are you trying to get them to behave a certain way anyway? You gotta start asking all these kind of things, like, why am I not giving them some freedom? Why am I micromanaging the living shit out of their lives? Why can't I back off and let go and stop trying to stay in this role where I'm a parent who has totally dependent children, which is only true at birth? That has to be dissolved and let go. We have to get to a point where the children, and usually the teenagers and the 20-somethings will clash the shit out of the parents and go against them and break away, and sometimes in a very dramatic manner, especially if there had been repressed things that were never said and never really had proper communication, and there was a lot of denial, or you weren't allowed to feel feelings, or various kinds of ways of relating that were dysfunctional. You kind of have to go away then and find yourself and heal and undo a lot of that bullshit and grow up and let go of that role of being a child and overcome the parent's attempt to stay being a parent, so that the two of you become equals. And then in that equality, you're being mature and having a maturing of the relationship, where you are now recognizing that who you thought was your child or your parent is actually one of God's children, and the two of you together come to God equally and both bow before Him who is your creator. And all of the rest of the roles and the parenting and the childhood and the the ownership and the control and the manipulation and the people pleasing and the trying to get attention and all this stuff has to go. It is unhealthy, and it's forms of mental illness. It is sickness. The child has to get out from under this ego hierarchy and break it, and sometimes it requires having a huge fight and going separate ways, and the children getting kicked out or moving out or whatever, going away, being able to collect themselves and find themselves and be who they are and get stronger in their own truth, to be able to then come back and meet on a more sane healthy level and actually have a relationship based on love and holiness. And it doesn't happen anywhere near as much as it needs to. I had to go through all this myself. So in this world, you could say these family relationships and these dynamics of parents and children and bosses and employees and governments and citizens and all these kind of things are teaching devices or learning devices, the purpose of which is to transcend those things, to use those things to become holy. And so one of the hardest things to do is to turn a special relationship into a holy relationship, because it's going to have to mean all kinds of values and specialness that you thought was the most sacred thing in the world. It's going to have to come into question. The person that you love the most, that you feel is your twin soul or your soulmate, or you just love the living shit out of them, if you're relating to them in a special way and you think that they're special, you don't really love them fully. You have special love and special hate with them, and most relationships will have times and periods where it's like mostly love and some hate and some fights and arguments and shit because of the specialness. You have to at least admit that the relationship is not perfect. It's fucked. The relationship, all special relationships are fucked. I should put that on the wall or something. So you get into this exclusive romantic thing with a person and marry them and everything, and the love of your life. You came into the relationship so that you could learn how to love unconditionally. You may have loved a lot, but it still had a lot of conditions on it, and it still wasn't perfect, and it wasn't full. And the exclusivity that you use to say, I love this person a lot because it's more than how much I love other people, using that as a device to try to emphasize and increase the love for this person, unfortunately undermines the love and attacks it, because you're now using separation devices to try to increase love, and that specialness is going to limit how much you can love this person. You cannot fully love any of God's children unless you're willing to love them all equally. You got to get honest. You cannot love your spouse or your children or your parents or anyone else truly, fully, in a holy way, if you think of them as special, and this is really hard to go through, but as you try to change your special relationship with a very significant person into a holy relationship, it's going to destroy the living crap out of the specialness. Airplanes today. And that's going to be very difficult to go through, because it means admitting that you don't fully love this person, admitting that there's limitations, admitting that when this person is not being loving towards you and they're attacking you and you're having a fight and you somehow just cannot find it in yourself to love them, it's because you lack the ability to love more than you love now because of your own denial of your own love ability. So now you don't really love yourself fully, and if you're going to love this person who is maybe not being loving toward you, this applies to spouses and families, but also other people. If another person is being seemingly the opposite of loving, and they're attacking you and hating you and judging you and criticizing and being a fucker, an asshole, your sworn enemy, if you cannot love them, it's because you don't love yourself enough, and you've got to dig really deep and be honest and admit that you are having a special relationship with that enemy because there's a limit on how much you can love, and you'll hit that limit and get to a breaking point and will feel like you just cannot tolerate this anymore, and you're going to run away, or you're going to leave, or attack the person back, or whatever. You just can't stand it anymore. You just don't see how you can possibly stay in this relationship because you can't find enough love to overcome the appearance of unlovingness, which means in some way within yourself you do not love yourself unconditionally, because if you did, your love would be so strong and so full and so forgiving that it wouldn't care how this person is or how they're seeming to treat you, because you'll be so certain and not a victim and unable to be affected by them, that your only response would be to love all the time. So I have to admit, I do not always love people. I cannot always love people. I have a lack of loving. I'm unloving towards many people. I try to be loving, but there are ways in which I am not receiving and allowing love for myself, and that reflects in relationships with other people. So if somebody's being an enemy and they're being an asshole, if I get riled up and I go out of love into ego, I've got a problem. I'm lacking love for myself, and I'm unwilling to love. So now the question is, do I go with the ego and separate or attack the person back, or do I find a way to love even more? Do I question, why don't I love myself enough? Why am I not having a holy relationship with myself? Where am I not relating to myself with unconditional love? Where do I think that I don't deserve love? Because it's going to play out in the relationship. I'm going to project it onto other people and think that they're the one who is not holy. I have to become willing to accept atonement for myself and become holy, aware of my own holiness and my own worthiness of being loved, and recognize and accept that God loves me 100%, so that I can then relate to others in that same way, at that same level, and have a holy connection with them, and see them as I see myself, and recognize them as identical to me, as a brother. That my mother and my father are my brothers, and they are identical to me in every way, and they are my perfect equals. My children, my sons and my daughters, are perfectly identical to me in every way, and they are perfect equals. Every other person in the world is my identical brother, and we relate perfectly at the same level of equality, and there's nothing different about me and anyone else. And that means you do have to overlook bodies. You've got to get past the body bullshit, the genetic inheritance, the I came from this other body lie, the my children came out of me, not true. It's a pretty strong illusion there. You did not create your children, and your parents did not create you. Otherwise, if you believe that, you are going to have to believe that you are being caused by these other people, and you are causing and making effects in these other people. And that is dysfunctional. That is victimhood. You have to go past that. You have to get past the structures of families and groups and special isolated sets of people in order to get to a holy relationship. And so as you're starting to transform your special relationship into a holy relationship, you don't have to give up the relationship. You don't have to push them away, say, we're not holy enough yet, so we're supposed to be holy, so let's not have any relationship at all. That's not it either. You still can stay in the relationship and work on it as you go and progress and gradually transform it into a holy way of relating. But it is going to have to entail bringing into question every form of exclusiveness, every form of isolation, every form of specialness. And that means coming to see that your spouse is your equal, that you unconditionally love and let go and accept them as they are, regardless of what they choose with their free will. And the same for parents and children and others. You've got to set them free. You've got to let go, and you've got to let go of the fake roles that were distortions caused by hierarchical relationships that are not God's will, that are not in accord with the structure of God's family. If in any way you're denying and relating to people in a way that you wouldn't relate to them in heaven, it is not correct. If you're relating to them as you're beneath them or above them, or you have power struggles, or they're causing you, or you're caused by them, or you're having effects, or you think that that they're responsible for you, or you're responsible for them, no, you're not. God is responsible for both of you. You are not responsible for other people. You're not responsible for their choices or their free will. And so you have to become equals with everyone. And the more that I realize this, and the more that I look at the fact that all my brothers are identical, it automatically makes you look past bodies, because you stop focusing on the differences that people have and saying this person's a male and this person's a female and this person's large and this person's small and this person's got this color skin and this person has that hair. Ways that the ego would isolate off special identities for people and treat them differently. As you get towards unconditional love and equality, you come to a kind of a center where you're now comparing people to the perfect beings that God created, and the sons of God, the Christ identity. You're now comparing, instead of comparing them based on forms, nothing is so blinding as sight of form. You're now starting to recognize the equality and the identicalness of all beings. So now you're comparing, you're sort of saying, here's the model for a perfect being, this innocent, holy soul that God created, that has nothing wrong with it and is independent and free-willed and holy. That is who these people are. So the male body is a distortion away from their identity, and it's not their identity. And the female body is a distortion away from that identity. It's not their identity. And as you start treating everyone the same, you'll start finding, I'm starting to find that my willingness to love people is greatly increasing. The willingness to love strangers, there's an expansion, a huge expansion happening for me right now in becoming able to love people that I never used to even think about loving, and relating to their holiness in a way that I always sectioned them off as special, and I don't want to have any relationship with them. My little bubble of specialness and isolation is growing and expanding into holiness, into wholeness. So I'm now relating to more of the whole and finding it easier to relate to people just on the basis of, if I just relate in this one same way towards everyone, I don't have to have all these adaptions to different kinds of people. I don't have to have reactions to different kinds of people. I can be just as safe and confident and certain and clear and loving and kind to everyone equally. It's so much easier. It's really opening me up to connecting with people more. Joining with brothers. You cannot join with brothers unless you're willing to love them all equally. So this is what I'm finding. This is expanding out into the correct model and family structure of how we're supposed to relate to others. Everyone is an equal. Everyone is my brother. Everyone deserves the same love. Everyone is perfect. Everyone is holy. And it's really bringing into question all the ways that I've kept people out and isolated off certain kinds of people and certain individuals that I didn't want to really be loving toward. That has to go. That whole sense of judgment is getting lifted away and just disappearing and getting replaced with moving towards holiness, towards wholeness, and towards therefore becoming included in the sonship, because now it's like the sonship's there being holy and all other brothers are the rest of the sonship. So now as you become holier and you become more willing to love all of them equally, you literally are now becoming more identified in the same way as the rest of the sonship. So you are returning to the sonship. You're coming back to rejoin the family. It's a homecoming. It's a reunion with your brothers and with God. And it makes me want to cry. How freeing and beautiful it is to be coming back to yourself at the same time as rejoining your brothers in heaven, and rejoining the perfection, and rejoining loving relationships and holiness and healthy ways of relating, and recognizing equality. Just has so many benefits and so many side effects that are positive, and it's really cool. So we need to learn to overcome all of the special ways that we relate to people and get down to one basic, simple, very, very simple model. Just love everyone the same. Treat everyone the same. Don't single people out. Don't isolate. Don't make things special. Don't have specialness. Just get to where you recognize the equality of everyone, and in recognizing that equality, you will become free of conflict in yourself, and it will smooth everything out, and all relationships will become easy and effortless and free from fear, and fulfilling and happy and heartfelt and connective, and you'll have an increasing communication. I find myself starting to talk to people more, and it just comes out, and it just keeps growing. And I'm reconnecting and rejoining mind to mind with others and experiencing the benefits of that. It is amazing. It bypasses the body. It undoes your body identity. It helps you to see past sickness. It helps you to feel supported and loved and worthy and awake, and I feel that my personality is coming out more because I'm not being so fake and special. Just being more natural and more relaxed. It's just everything gets better when you love everyone equally and acknowledge this is God's family structure. This is how we're supposed to relate. Every brother is my equal brother that I love in full holiness. Unconditional love. No exceptions. This is the template of sanity and health and functional relationships. Is to function the way that God intended, to be the way that God created you, to relate to your brothers on the correct cause and effect structure where you're not causing each other, other than loving each other, and acknowledging that we're all equals, and that all the other dynamics and power struggles and ownership and possession and control is not God's will. It is not healthy. So holy relationships are simply reflections of how we relate as brothers in heaven, being holy. Very simple. Hopefully that's in line with what the Course says. I'll find out later. Being holy, having a holy relationship is the opposite of having a special relationship. And you can love everyone. And you can be loved by everyone, because you can be loved by the entirety of heaven. All of God's creation loves you. I think I'll stop there. I'm kind of running out of things to say, so love from me to you as an equal brother, no matter who you are, no matter what age or race or preferences or persuasions or body shapes or whatever bullshit. I am your equal brother, and we are identical, and there's nothing different between us, and God loves us both the same. So God bless, and happier dreams, and see you next time.